First start out in jiu-jitsu? And it's a bit of a difficult one for you to answer, I think.
When you're in the UK, there wasn't really like an official. It's not like now where you join a jiu-jitsu club and then you get started. So I'd come from like a Jeet Kune Do background in a way. So I remember it must have been. I remember in 1991, I think. I went down to there was like a seminar of lots of different martial arts at Bob Breen's Academy in London. So I think I was around 16 at the time, and Rick Young was teaching some Judo Niwaza there. So that was my kind of the first time I'd done any groundwork. I even remember now, he was just going from like a Kezagatame position in Judo, moving around the body. But I think Rick he'd had influences in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from back then. So it wasn't, you could class it as Judo or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's basically just doing groundwork. So that was back in 1991. But obviously I wasn't in a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club then. So that was my first, that was my first exposure really to groundwork. And then after that, it was just getting basically whatever information you can. But because they didn't have YouTube and other things, it was a lot harder to find information. So I remember getting Neil Adams' old books. He had a book series on like triangles and arm locks and stuff. We had the old Gracie videos, and it was just doing seminars. I think someone called Richard Bustillo came over maybe to Nottingham around the same time, and he did like a Shuto seminar. So he was doing like, obviously everything was connected to kind of MMA, even though it didn't exist then as a sport per se. So it was all about kind of getting the clinch, getting takedowns, then going to the ground and going from there. So I suppose you could say, but actual official Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is probably when I went over to in Birmingham, when I went to the club that Mauricio Gomez was running in Birmingham, which is the first kind of Gracie Barra Birmingham, which was I think I went there first in 1999. But obviously for the 8 years in between, I was still doing groundwork regular, whether it was a judo club or whether it was training with like friends and training partners doing bits of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah.
So did that affect your Jeet Kune Do? It kind of went from that kind of seminar where it was like all those different martial artists, and you were just like, oh, I really want to learn this kind of stuff now. Yeah,
I was more interested in the more functional martial arts that had more sparring in it, basically. So I was always interested in boxing and Thai boxing and anything where there was a sporting sparring aspect to it. Because then for me, it always felt more realistic. If you could spar, at least then you know if something's working or not. So
was it you got into martial arts because you just kind of you're naturally quite competitive, or did you care about self-defense?
I was playing table tennis one day in the sports centre, and there was some traditional jiu-jitsu, and I'm sure I was probably 13, and I think I saw people like doing a flying kick over someone else, and it just looked quite cool. So and then when I got started in traditional jiu-jitsu when I was 13, and then through that, it was probably like the Bruce Lee, probably Enter the Dragon or something I'd seen, and that got me into Wing Chun. And from Wing Chun, I started to go into Jeet Kune Do, which was, and then when I'd met Rick Young, I realised that, he's an amazing martial artist, and I saw kind of the level he was at even back then in 1991, and that pushed me. And then gradually I got pushed towards Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that became my focus.
I thought you were going to say there for a minute, when you discovered self-defense, I was playing table tennis and someone stole my bat and I had to get it back. But now you might be one of the earliest adopters then, because we've spoke to quite a lot of people in the UK now, haven't we?
Yeah, we just had Mark Wilder and then
Paul Bridges as well. But I think they were kind of like 93, 94 UFC time. So you were even predating that back to 91. And we speak to a lot of my members around, students around, like the point you made right at the very beginning. I think we were rolling then, but there was no jiu-jitsu. Like it just didn't even exist. It wasn't on anyone's radar at all. And what were those times like then? So you were trying to find the videos, you were trying to find the magazines, and how were you practicing? How were you getting your groundwork in?
So basically, when I went to Bob Breen's I think it was 2 years running. I think it was, I don't know the exact years. It might have been 91, 92, but it'll be recorded somewhere that. And then I met someone called Mike Gregory, who is, I assume he's still teaching in somewhere on the outskirts of Manchester. So then we started training together, and he'd got influences from catch wrestling. So in the 90s, Eric Paulson used to come over as well. He might even still come over now. So that was in the mid-90s. We'd have Eric Paulson coming over, and some of the Jeet Kune Do guys who had come over had also done some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So we're getting bits of information from seminars, bits of stuff from cross-training with catch wrestlers. And I was going to Judo as well, that was near my house. And even then, the Judo club that I was going to in Middleton near my house had someone called Neil Eckersley training there, who was kind of famous for groundwork as well. So we're getting bits from everywhere. We had the old like videos from Japan of all the shoot wrestling stuff in Japan, and then obviously once the UFC had come out, then you get that information as well. So then it's just putting all the pieces together. But we were still training intelligently. We were, but we didn't have a rule set to so back in. When we were rolling back in, say, 93, 94, we'd be doing heel hooks, and there was no like rules of we're just doing everything. If you got a submission, you'd just be happy, whether it was a neck crank or a heel hook or whatever.
Tap's the tap, mate. You know what I mean? I say that here, but it's interesting you say about Eric Paulson, because I've told this story before. My first ever seminar was in Aberdeen in 2002 with Eric Paulson, and he taught heel hooks on that day as well. Remember it clearly. And it's funny how it's all kind of come back around now, and that's the vogue thing. But obviously it's been around for forever, right?
Yeah. I can't even remember when Eric Paulson first came, but I think it might have been mid-90s that he used to come over regularly to the UK then. I believe he's still coming over now. I think somewhere near Wigan, I think he still might come over every now and again.
On the podcast.
Roger.
He's still in touch with him?
No, I've not seen him since I went to LA in 99 or 2000. So I went to the El Santo Academy there, and Eric Paulson was teaching there. So I think that's the last time I'd seen him in 99 or 2000. Yeah.
Cool.
Professor, back then, like in the early mid-90s, did you guys have a concept of like how vast jiu-jitsu is, or did you think, there's like these 20, 30 moves you can do?
No, I remember I got to a point, because it was a limited group, I got to a point where I thought, well, I know most of the things that, you need to know, as in I know how to do it. A few different things. I'm like, it's kind of it. You just got to get a little bit better. And then obviously, as time goes on, you start getting better yourself. And then it's more like the more you know, the more you realise that you don't know. And that's just been going on and on for years. Whereas I do remember a point where it was probably 25 years ago where I thought, you know what, I'm getting to grips with this now. I know what I need to do, and that kind of goes on for forever. But it was fun times back then, because we were still putting it together. It was all based a bit more around like kind of mixed martial arts, and it wasn't just grappling we were doing then. So I'd done competitions back in 94 and 95 where you could kind of slap and punch to the head, tackle to the floor, and then and do submissions. So I remember so obviously your memory goes, but I've got videos of doing kind of triangles and Americanas back in kind of 95, I think it is the videos from. So
wow.
What year was it was it Rob Drysdale was talking about? We had Rob Drysdale on the podcast talking about like when triangles first kind of came out, because a lot of people didn't know about them.
He was saying
about
like
a similar time, right?
He was interviewing Carlos Gracie Jr. and he was saying that he Carlos didn't learn the triangle till he was like already a purple belt or something.
No, like in the 70s.
Yeah. But obviously, I don't know the history of it, but I guess I don't know when it came into effect in judo. But I've definitely had judo books from the 90s with with triangles in it. So I guess it must be way, way before then, I think.
Yeah. What was it like kind of going into, well, I'll ask you first. Did you have a humbling moment in jiu-jitsu where it's like, that first time someone like really much smaller than you kind of rolls you up and it's like, how the hell did this happen? And like, and it got you hooked, or when was that for you, or did it happen? Or
I think I was hooked kind of way before then. But I remember when I first arrived in Brazil, I'd probably been a blue belt. I'd probably been a blue belt a few months, and I remember rolling with. But I already knew what jiu-jitsu was, and I knew that someone a lot smaller, could tie you in knots easily. But I remember rolling with a green belt. When I just arrived in Brazil, and we might have had a 5 or 10 minute roll. I remember getting arm locked twice off this 15-year-old green belt. But don't forget, I'd been training like 9 years then, grappling. Right. And I think it was either that year or the year after he won the juvenile world championships, So it made me feel a tiny bit better. He was very good. He was 15 years old. But most green belts are. If you meet a green belt in Brazil, they're going to be a very high level.
I was. Did we break down this match? I think we might have broke down a match. We did in lockdown, obviously, to keep the members happy. We were doing kind of fight breakdowns and stuff, and we had a match on about the close guard. And Braulio was commentating, and he was talking about, I can't remember the fighter, but he was saying, the player, but he was saying he was tapping out black belts as a yellow belt back in Brazil. And there must be a lot of those Brazilians out there that just absolute killers, man. Been doing it since they were like 1.
Yeah. It was that the guy actually caught me from close guard. Like he was trying to like flower sweep me, and then I'm trying to bait, and then he just switched to the arm, and he was slick. He was good. But I've seen it before where, like there's a 15-year-old and he'll like fly an arm bar a black belt, and then the black belt will like smash him. You just get caught with like, you might have a hand in the collar too far, and the kid, obviously the black belt's not going crazy because he's a 15-year-old kid, and then all of a sudden they'll get caught, and then there's a bit of payback then.
I was going to ask you, what was it like to walk into Mauricio's academy, the original Gracie Barra UK, for the first time? And do you remember meeting Mauricio for the first time? What that was like?
I remember it was at an old church hall, and it might have been 1999 then. So afterwards, they went to a place called the Custard Factory. But before that, the church hall, I just remember it was freezing cold there. Like the roof was falling through. I'm sure I might have even been training with like gloves on just to keep my fingers, so you could grip, because it was, I think there was a hole in the roof there. But it was exciting because it was something new. Not many people had heard of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu then. So I was living in Ipswich at the time. So I'd drive over on a Saturday. I'd drive all the way over from Ipswich to Birmingham just to train. And some of the guys there had stayed, because they knew I'd driven over, they'd stay behind. So sometimes, I don't know, we'd just stay for hours rolling. So it might have been 4 hours we'd spar. Because I knew I couldn't train in the week. In the week, I was doing judo in Ipswich. So on Saturdays, I wanted to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I'd drive all the way over. And then I'd get as much training as I could on the Saturday, because I knew I had a few days to recover. But I always remember Mauricio. He'd always remember my name. And I don't know if he's the same with everyone, but, and he has lots of different students. And because I wasn't there full time at the start, I was kind of popping in. And then I remember going back in, and I remember him saying, "Hi, Steve." And I think he was talking to someone else, and I'd look behind me. And it was impressive. You feel a lot more welcome as well. When you come in and you're a bit nervous, it's a new gym. It's like, that probably the highest grade at the time in Europe, and you'd feel a bit nervous being around. And then when someone remembers your name, you just feel more at home. And yeah, it was a good time in Birmingham. Then it was a good time. So it was kind of the start of one of the main clubs, obviously in the UK. Then the start of kind of Gracie Barra in the UK. And it was exciting times.
And that's a 2 or 3 hour drive from Ipswich to Birmingham.
Yeah, it was on the Saturday, so there was no traffic, but it was just over 2 hours, I think. So
yeah. So again, we spoke about this. I mean, a lot of our members, we're in a residential area here in North Leeds, and a lot of our members just walk from the front door into the academy, and they don't really know how lucky they are. We all had to travel to find information. I had to drive down to see Victor. A guy, a very good friend of mine, Lewis Matthews, who used to come and train with you.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, exactly. So me and Lewis kind of came up together as best mates, and I know he used to drive all the way from Malton out in East Yorkshire out to Leeds and then to Manchester to train with you to get some more information and stuff. So people used to do that back then. It doesn't happen now. And
you don't know how lucky you are, and it feels like I'm a granddad saying, "Look, you've got everything on a plate here." There's like, in every town now, there's good quality jiu-jitsu, and people don't have to travel. They don't have to travel as much. But there was something exciting about back in the day, though, because like you felt like you're getting something like new, and not many people knew about it, and so there was a buzz to learning this kind of this new martial art that had come over.
Your judo academy and friends that you were training with in Ipswich, could you not convince them to try and do lots of groundwork with you?
No, I remember in Ipswich there was two black belts who ran the club there, and one of the black belts did do a lot of groundwork, so he was very good on the ground.
Oh, nice.
But the style ends up a little bit different, obviously, because of the rule set. It changes the game a bit.
Right.
So it's different rolling with people who are just rolling for judo-based rules compared to people who are rolling for Brazilian jiu-jitsu rules.
Right. So when was it that you're like, oh, I'm going to go over to Brazil to do this?
I'd left Ipswich and moved to Birmingham, and then
was that just to kind of be closer to training?
Yeah, just for training. So I quit my job in Ipswich, moved to Birmingham to train. And then and just got like a part-time job in Birmingham just to have enough money to live. There were 6 of us who all trained together, Mauricio had left the UK then. So there was a brown belt teaching in Birmingham, a Brazilian brown belt. So we were all living in the same house. So there was 6 of us living in the same house. All the rooms were rented individually, but we just made it so everyone was in the same place.
Awesome.
And so we had like the front room matted. Obviously we had the gym as well. So we'd be training like twice a day at the gym, but then for some reason we'd matted the living room as well.
This is like the old school.
This is absolutely awesome,
UK
man.
Daisy Fresh.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So at the time, like the best guys at the gym were all living in this house with 6 of us there, which was great just for information. You basically just live in the jiu-jitsu lifestyle, and anytime, day or night, if you had a question, you could just kind of fire the question off or train or whatever. So we did that for, it must have been at least 6 months we were doing that. The brown belt ended up going back to Brazil. So there was kind of no instructor then at Gracie Barra, Birmingham. Obviously, there's blue belts there who were good level blue belts who had very solid basics off Mauricio. But because I was kind of dedicated my whole life to doing this then, I kind of, my goal was to train kind of where there was a lot more black belts. So then it just made sense. And obviously I didn't know how it was going to pan out. So I had no idea that it was going to explode in the UK and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was going to be everywhere. And I didn't know Braulio was eventually going to come over and everything else. So I ended up leaving in early 2000. I'd left Birmingham and then moved over to Brazil to train.
Wow.
Some commitment, that.
Yeah. And did you have a plan? Like, what was the plan? You were just going to like rock up to an academy and say, hey, I want to train, or what was the...
So when I first went over, because I'd kind of planned this anyway, and then the brown belt who was teaching there had gone back to Brazil. So I went to his gym in Sao Paulo, or his instructor's gym in Sao Paulo, in a place called Campinas. And I stayed there for a few months training. And then, but I still wanted to go to Rio, to the main kind of Gracie Barra in Rio. It just made sense because I'd started with Mauricio and it was and there was a big gym and I'd already met people from Gracie Barra. It made sense just to go to the main gym in Rio. So in 2000, moved over to Rio then, got a place to stay. Luckily we found like a little kind of hostel, but in the hostel, it wasn't really a traveller's hostel. It wasn't far from the gym. I think I was paying £70 a month for accommodation, which was like dirt cheap. And then started training full time at Gracie Barra, in the main Gracie Barra like Matrix headquarters.
Wow. Well, I definitely want to ask you a lot about that. But when you first got there, was there much of a culture shock for you going to Brazil, or were you quite ready for it?
I had a clue, because obviously I'd already spoke to Mauricio about it, and I spoke to the other brown belt who was there about like what it's like living in Brazil. But it's like anything. Sometimes it's better just to go over, immerse yourself. I still had a couple of contacts, so I wasn't going out with not knowing anyone. Mm-hmm. And then as soon as I arrived there was a couple of other people from. There's a guy from Canada there, another guy from America. So you soon meet other people who can kind of help you out a little bit as well. So then it was just a slow process and of learning Portuguese and getting used to the Brazilian culture. I managed to get a job there teaching English as a second language. And then you kind of moved out of the hostel, managed to get an apartment, and then I kind of settled. It was like I was settled in Rio, and I could have literally stayed there permanently forever,
How long did it take you to learn Portuguese?
I'd learned a tiny bit before I went, but just like days of the week, a few numbers, and then when I'd got there, it was okay speaking. After like 6 months or so, you could kind of get away speaking one-to-one with someone. But obviously, it's completely different. If you go to a restaurant and there's music playing in the background and there's 10 people around the table and the Brazilians love to talk over each other. So everyone's kind of fighting to talk. And then it's hard work, and then you'd be sat around the table and someone would go, Steve, you're a bit quiet tonight. And I'm like, listen, by the time you've figured out what the conversation's about, and then you figure out what you're going to say, and then the conversation's moved on, and people are like, why aren't you saying anything? I'm like, I'm literally trying to just keep up with what's going on.
My brain's going.
Yeah, and it gives you a headache. You end up with a headache just trying to. But obviously, over time, that gets better and better over time. And I was still socialising with. There was still lots of people who'd come over and train. When I'd rented the apartment, I was renting rooms out to other people who had come over to train jiu-jitsu. So I was still spending. It wasn't just Brazilians I was hanging out with. So I was speaking English part of the, probably half of the time, and speaking Portuguese the other half of the time.
And Steve, sorry mate, I don't want to date you here, but how old were you then when you went out there?
25. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
I was 25 when I went out, and then I stayed there for 8 years.
Was there anyone back home kind of telling you, like, Steve, what you're doing? You need to get a job and settle down, mate?
Every time I came back, because I don't know when, at some point, house prices started to boom in the UK, but obviously I wasn't here then. I don't know if that was in the early 2000s, was it?
Mid-2000s, mate, yeah, because I bought my first house in 2001 for dirt cheap, but mid-2000s you start to go.
Yeah, so I remember then I was coming back and everyone's like, oh, I'm glad I bought a house then because prices have boomed and people are talking about pensions and how this, and I'm thinking, life's good, but I have nothing, Yeah. But then I just, if life's good, I think it doesn't matter. Nothing else matters. If you speak to so many people who've got so many problems. And when I was in Brazil and I was enjoying my life there, I always thought, you know what, even if I have to, if you had a planned retirement for 60, then I'll be like, I prefer to spend 8 years in Brazil and I'll retire when I'm 68 and I'll work, if I need to work longer in the future, I will do. But while I was 25, I thought I may as well. I was still working in Brazil, but I was just making enough money to live on. But that's all I needed,
That's worth pausing on there because I think that's really profound what you've just said. Yeah, a lot of people could learn a lot from that. I think a lot of people are ground down in jobs that they don't particularly enjoy. And they're kind of on this hamster wheel aiming for 60, like you say. Actually, there's some real strength and power in trying to say no to that and following your dreams and your passions like you did. So really, really strong message, that, Steve. Thanks for that.
Yeah. I think that's the same with the retirement. Everyone looks at this point and they look forward to this future point. And then when they retire, they're like, if you want to do sport, usually your body's a little bit, if you wanted to do jiu-jitsu, you're not going to wait till you're 60 to do jiu-jitsu. That, starting out as a white belt, it's doable, but it's going to be tough when you're starting later as well. And just your whole body, your health and everything else. So I thought, if you're going to enjoy, I just thought if I'm 25, I'll enjoy a big chunk of my life now. And I'll, and you can always deal with the rest later. Things always, things will fall into place if you're motivated enough to do things. But obviously I was still working in Brazil. I just wasn't, I'd literally work enough hours just to get enough money so I could pay the gym, maybe go out one night on the weekend and then have enough money to live and eat,
For sure. Tell me about walking into Gracie Barra HQ for the first time and your first session, if you remember, of course.
I can't even remember my first set. You know, it's all gone a bit blurred now, so I don't even remember. I don't remember the first day I walked into the main Gracie Barra. But I did have a friend there from. There was an English friend as well who was over at the time. But the gym, even the gym in Brazil now, it's changed a lot. Kind of, even the time I was there, they'd upgraded the gym a lot there. But obviously, I remember even going in training. I remember being nervous, and you're a foreigner. You're in a different country. Obviously, everyone's speaking a different language. I could speak a little bit of Portuguese, you know. And literally, the mat would be. I remember lots of sessions. There was no white belts there, so I was already a blue belt, but there was literally no white belt in the class. And there might have been, I don't know, there might have been 80 people on the mat or something. And it was all, maybe half of the people were black belts. And then, you know, lots of brown belts, purple belts, blue belts, and then no white belts. So even though I was a blue belt in 2000, I was still at the bottom, you're kind of at the bottom of the food chain, you know? And then
even from the top in the UK to the bottom in Brazil. Yeah.
And then even if you grab a green belt, that's not going to help you because they're probably purple belt standards. So... but it was good. It would have actually been better probably if there would have been more white belts just to try stuff. So when I first got there, I remember just having private lessons on defending because I thought it kind of makes sense when you start. I'm always going to be in a bad position with everyone. So I thought, if nothing else, then you've got something to focus on. You know, if I just work escapes first, just because of that environment I was in. And then obviously over the years, as you kind of work your way up through the belts and stuff, then it was probably more advantageous when I was a purple or brown belt there, because then I had people who you kind of better than in the gym, the lower grade, you have people your level, and then obviously there's loads of like higher grades there who are just, you know, they're always going to be beating you.
There must have been some really big names of Gracie Barra there at that time, right?
Yeah. So obviously Roger Gracie was there training. Pedro Parno was there training. There's literally a list. There's people that you've probably never heard of who are like, you know, they might not be world champions, but they're not, you know, the level is still up there where they would beat, you know, most people, you know.
What was it like learning from Carlos Gracie Jr. and what was it like to roll with him back then?
It was good. He'd always roll. I actually rolled with him a lot. So we'd do... we'd always do 10-minute rounds there at the great, because that was the time for like adult black belt, you know, competitions. But whenever I rolled with Kalinas, it was always, we'd roll for 10 minutes and he'd always say, Steve, do you want to carry on? And you could never say no. So then you'd be like, even if you're exhausted, you might have rolled before and you might have been rolling for 50 minutes, and then you roll with him and he goes, do you want to carry on? And so you always say yes. So he'd always roll for a lot, you know. Yeah, it's very rare that I think I've rolled with him for 10 minutes. It's always like a 20-minute roll or a 30-minute roll, you know. And he just knew that eventually you're going to mess up, you know. And it's just a case, you do all right and you think, I'm doing all right then. And then as the time goes on, it was just a kind of a waiting game. And he's like, and I'm sure in his head he thought, Steve's going to mess up any second now and then I'm going to catch him, you know.
I would take that as a massive compliment, Steve, that he actually wanted to keep training with you, with all those people there. And you must have been doing something right for the main man to want to spend time with you in a role. That says a lot about your jiu-jitsu, I think.
At the start, it was weird because I'd always, you know, because you're kind of respectful. So probably when the first time I rolled him, but I'd have been a lower grade then. I remember, you know, when you end up going too light and you don't want to do anything, even though they're way, way better than you kind of, you want to be respectful. But then because I trained with him a lot, it got to a level where it was nice because I was actually trying to beat him, you know, not being a dick, but just I would actually spar, you know, like you'd spar properly. Like I wasn't giving him anything. I would literally be trying to, you know, like have a competitive role, you know, but which was good because then you see someone's level, whereas you don't see that level. If I'm just trying to be all respectful and not do anything, you know, then you don't realize someone's level. But then it's when you think, right, you know, it's because once you've got rapport with someone, it's a bit different. I would never do that if I was rolling with someone, you know, who I'd never met before, who was like, you know, a much higher grade, especially back then. You'd always train light, but it was really good because it got to the point where I could actually try, but obviously you still don't get very far.
That was my next question. That was the obvious question, right? And did you?
No, it's just tough. But obviously he's not going. We ended up just having good rolls where it's like he's not going, full out, because obviously he's way better than me. So it ends up where you're doing like a 70-80% roll. But I don't know, that maybe that's why he picked me out to spar with a lot, because it was, you have a good roll. But don't forget, I'm 20 years younger than him as well, which still didn't help me that much. But it's only now when I get older, and if I'm rolling with someone who's 20 years younger than me now, they've got quite a bit of, in my head, I'm thinking, this guy's 20 years younger than me now, and that is a massive advantage when you're, as you get older. So.
No, I know how that feels, mate. Exactly.
What was the class structure like? Was it mainly just rolling, or would he teach a lot? Or
When I first went over there, Marcio Feitosa taught a lot of the classes there, who was like the main guy. He was multiple-time world champion, very good instructor. So he'd teach some of the classes, and then sometimes Carlos Gracie Jr. would teach some of the classes there. But over the 8-year period is there, it varied a little bit, because that at the start, I think they did more of the classes, but then obviously they started, I don't know what year it was, maybe 2003 or 4. I think things started to open up in America. So then they weren't there all the time. So, and the class structure changed a little bit, but it didn't matter to me so much. If I wanted more technique, I could always do private lessons with people. And then, and the sparring was always the main bit. So I remember maybe from 6:30 or 7 p.m. in the evening, it was just 10-minute rounds until there was no one left on the mat. Wow. So it wasn't, they didn't have set classes. So I think that if I remember right, you go in at 6 o'clock, there might be a warm-up, there might not be, and then they do a little bit of technique for a bit. And then maybe at 6:45, say, the 10-minute rounds would start, but some people would turn up at all different times. So some people would turn up at 7 o'clock, some people turn up at 7:30, 8 o'clock. So you could literally just keep doing 10-minute rounds until, I don't know, maybe 9:30 or something, So it's good for flexibility then, but obviously it doesn't really work as a business model. If you're running a school and you want different classes for beginners classes and everything else, that's probably not the way things work now. But it's great if you're a purple belt, say, and and you don't want to drill as many techniques, like for hours. So you might be at that point where you just want to roll, and get that mat time in. So it was brilliant for that.
Amazing. Do you have any particular days from that time that like really stand out in your memory? Like, oh, these are days I'm going to remember for like the rest of my life, kind of thing?
There's a few. I can't remember what I've talked about on the other podcast. I remember Henzo coming in one day to the gym, and he brought like some breeze blocks in and a baseball bat. And I remember, so he puts a bit, the whole class stops. It's like, imagine it's like 7 p.m. and everyone's rolling, everyone's training. There's competitions coming up. Henzo walks in, the whole place stops and everyone's surrounded. Then Henzo brings his baseball bat in and then he kicks his shin through the baseball bat, and smashes the baseball bat in half. And then he gets another one and he says, right, who's going to do it, And I was like, this is nuts, This might have been back in 2000. It might have been like 2002 or something. It was like earlier on. It might have been nearly 20 years ago. And then, so everyone's a bit wary of doing it. And then I remember Roger stood up to do it. But we had in Brazil, they have a team championships. And I think the team championships were coming up at that time. So Roger stands up to kick through this baseball bat. And then Carlos Gracie Jr. is like, what are you doing? The team championships are coming up next week. We don't want you, breaking your leg. Well, you don't want you breaking your leg anyway, And then Henzo must have done something where, I don't know if the bat was oval shaped or not, so he tweaks it. So you end up kicking through the thin part than the thick part. And because it was Roger, he kind of tweaked the baseball bat a bit. And I think Roger did come up, kicked it and snapped the baseball bat in half. But Henzo was obviously tweaking the baseball bat, so you've got a thicker part of it, and someone comes up and they're going to bust the leg. But yeah, it was all good fun. Yeah. But there's far, you know, I think every time I speak to one, I remember something different, or a different memory comes up from kind of back in the day, you know, which is good.
Sure. What was it that made you want to leave?
I think I got my black belt in January 2007. Yeah. And then, which was it was always kind of not specific goal to I want to get my black belt and leave, but obviously by the time when I got my brown belt, I thought it's stupid to leave kind of before I get my black belt when I was already set up there. I was living there. I had a job there, an apartment, and everything was going well there. So I thought there's no point leaving before I get my black belt. So got my black belt in January 2007, and then I thought I want to compete a bit as a black belt. So that year I kind of hit the competitions as a black belt. So it was cool. I remember my first competition at black belt. It was a state championships, and I think there was 8 people in the category, and I managed to get to the final of my first competition as black belt, which is nice because even though you get your black belt, there's always doubts, like because there was brown belts in the academy who I sure was smashing me, you know. So you get your black belt and you're like, but there's other people who are better, you know. And so it was nice to get to the final. I still remember there was 3 people. I think they just started the 3 referees. The 2 corner people and the referee. So, and I think it was only for black belt finals or something. So I remember it's weird things stick in your head. I remember having 3 referees, and I was just excited that there was kind of 3 referees on the mat, you know. But unfortunately, the guy in the final was good, and so I lost the final. But I was just happy to kind of, you know, that I got to the final in my first comp at black belt. So I ended up staying kind of just over a year after getting my black belt, just to compete a lot more and to carry on training at black belt as a black belt, really. And then I think I was at a crossroads where if I didn't leave Brazil, I felt like I was going to stay there forever. I needed to make a decision because I didn't want to teach English forever. Obviously, you can't open well, you can, but it's a lot more difficult opening a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym if you're in Rio and there's so many high-level guys there. You know, I'm sure it's doable, but you've got a lot of competition there. So it was in March 2008. So it's like over a year after getting a black belt, I decided to move back to the UK. It just made sense, and I got a regular job here, full-time job as a software engineer in the UK, and then I started teaching in 2008. Yeah, but I was just teaching part-time, you know, like 3 evenings a week, and then it just gradually grew and grew from there. But I just thought I'd kind of done my time in Brazil. I loved it there. And, you know, it was a difficult decision to leave, but it was more to do with work and everything else. And, you know, I didn't want to teach. I'd been teaching English 6 years, so I didn't want to carry on doing that any longer, you know. Right.
You struggled to get your hands on a black belt, right? Once you got promoted, like you couldn't find actual...
Oh, yeah, I couldn't. I don't know what was happening, so... But they had shops. In Baja, in the area, there's a big shopping centre there, and they had the shops there. I remember going to the Atama shop, and there was no black belts anywhere. So my first black belt, and I was still wearing a brown belt in the gym. And so then it was like 3 weeks later, and people were saying, look, it's a bit disrespectful, you know, like not talking about. And I'm like, I literally cannot find a black belt in, you know. So I don't know if there was just a massive like promotions at that time. So my first black belt was actually an A1 black belt that didn't fit me fully. And then an A1 at Tamara, I think it was. And then I managed to get, about a few weeks later, I managed to get an A2 black belt then, but I think that black belt's actually, I think I've still got my original, I stopped wearing my original black belt because it was literally, it turned white.
Wow.
So I've actually got it in the drawer. Yeah, so I got it, but then it just looked, some people said it looked really cool, but then when I'm teaching it, you know, I've probably been teaching for 6 years in the UK wearing the same belt. And then when people come into the gym, some people go, no, that looks really cool because you got a really old belt on. But then I thought it might look a bit better to get a proper black belt. And, you know, and obviously you couldn't compete. Well, there's no way they'd have let me compete with that belt, you know, after coming back from Brazil, because the belt was literally in you know, it'd gone. I've been in the white belt category, which might have helped.
You ended up getting mugged a couple of times in Brazil, right?
Yeah, I was mugged on the. Well, a few different things happened. Once we're driving back from the south side of the city around. It's called Nehemiah, around like so there was mountains going up, and then there's a road that leads down to like rocks leading down to the water. So there's only one lane going each way. And I remember we were driving back with an American guy, Wes, who was staying in my house. And I'd like half fallen asleep in the car. It must have been about 5 p.m. or something. I don't even know what we'd been doing there. And then the police sirens were going, and I had told him to go a different way. When you hear too many police sirens, it's never good. And I remember the police car swerved in front of us and pulled over. So we had to stop behind the police car. But there's only 2 lanes. So then the police are hiding behind our car, firing up the mountain, and then there's people on top of the mountain firing down at the police. So we're kind of hid underneath this, and we can hear the gunfight. And it wasn't it was automatic weapons going off. So I'm literally hiding in the bottom of the car in the front seat, you know. Wes is he wants to reverse the car. He needs a 3-point turning because we couldn't go forward. But all the traffic on the other side, no one wants to stop. So on this road that's probably 30 mile an hour road, all the cars on the other side of the road are obviously doing about 70 because they're driving past gunfire, so they're not going to leisurely drive past. So eventually, it must have took him about 30 seconds to 3-point turn it and then drive back the other way. But it was a weird feeling because even though you're not, you know, it's not like you're in a fight where you're getting hurt, but because you can hear the gunfire, you just know that if one of those bullets goes wrong, you're in trouble, you know. Especially when you can see the police kind of hiding behind our car, firing up. I was like, that's not never good sign. And then, we basically we headed back into the south side of the city then, but there was no way of getting back to Baja because it had just caused chaos in the city. So we just went out and got drunk. We're just, you know, it was like a Tuesday night or something. And I remember going, we need to find a bar, and we just, you know. I think we stayed out till like 3. You know, I was just happy to be alive, and I was like, I don't go out enough. We're gonna have a blowout, and I'm just happy to be around. You know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
When you go back to the UK, when was the transition from kind of doing your software engineering to full-time coach?
It was gradual. So I'd started as the gym was getting busier. It was working out all right for a bit, and then as the gym was getting busier, I don't know how long I think I worked as a software for 8 years nearly, but I'd cut my hours down. So instead of 5 days a week, I'd cut it down to 4 days a week. Then I was working 3 days a week. And because once you get to know how you're doing your job, obviously you could do a bit of admin. While I was working, I could do some of the club admin, you know, when I was doing my daytime job. But because I was getting my daytime job done, no one really cared. Everyone knew I was running another business, you know. So it kind of worked out all right, you know, working 3 days a week and running the gym. But then obviously, I don't know, you know, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of exploded, you know, in the last few years. So it got to a point where it was kind of silly to be doing 2 jobs. I needed to focus more on the gym. Yeah.
Right. I imagine it would have been easy for you to have set up a Gracie Barra originally. Was there a reason you wanted to split apart?
There was already a Gracie Barra Manchester set up, you see.
Right.
And at the time, I remember, because I'd spoken to Carlos Gracie Jr. in Brazil, but it wasn't as organised as it is now. I don't even think, you know, so to set a gym up, it wasn't like it is now with all the structures and everything else in place back in 2008. So there was already a Gracie Barra set up there. And when I'd left, I'd not really spoke to him in detail about what to do. So when I come back, I didn't want to tread on their toes by opening, you know. And I don't even know, I can't remember who was running the Gracie. The Gracie Barra Manchester had been around, I think, from 2004 maybe, or I think maybe, I don't know if Legato set it up or...
I think Legato set it up, Stephen. I think Lucio Sergio was teaching.
Yeah. So I've known them both in Brazil. But I think when I was still in Brazil, Legato had set up, this is before Lucio Sergio came over, it was Legato had set it up originally. I remember it being in Bolton Wrestling Club back in the day, and then I don't know the timelines, but I just remember there was a club already there, so I felt a bit awkward opening another club, you know, like within a few miles, and then it's like what to call the club and everything else, and so and I wanted a bit more flexibility to do my own thing as well. So I just ended up opening. I just called it Manchester Jiu-Jitsu at first, and I actually put a Gracie Barra symbol kind of on the website. But then obviously, as things got more structured in Gracie Barra, then obviously I took the Gracie Barra symbol off the website just so I'm not like causing any problems with anyone. And then I did a poll just to see what I should call the gym, and then I just ended up, I come up with some horrendous ideas. Someone come up with Stealth BJJ, and then I just did a poll, and Stealth BJJ got the most likes at that time, so I just went with that. So it wasn't even my idea of a name. I just went with kind of what the majority thought, and that was the best of a bad bunch, really. Nice.
What was the vision for Stealth? Like, what did you want it to be beyond just kind of a jiu-jitsu club?
It was, I just wanted it like a place where everyone could come and train. I didn't want it too formal where, so even now in the classes now that there's lots of open mat times where people could, like I said, in Brazil, you could come in at 6:30 and you could just roll till 9 o'clock. But obviously, it's finding a balance between running a business and having enough people paying, where some people have hourly slots for classes. But so I still needed that. And I didn't want to run it like it was run in Brazil where there was no beginners classes and everything else. So I was trying to find a balance between a relaxed environment and still having formal classes where, you still got your beginners classes and you've still got your technique classes. But at the moment, people can come into the gym at 5:30 in the evening, say, and then because we've got a big space. Even while the kids' classes are on, we've got a separate room with over 3,000 square foot of mats. So adults can just come in and roll for like an hour and a half before class, and then then there's a class 7 to 8, and then in the evening, then at 8 o'clock there's more rolling as well. So it just gives people that flexibility to kind of arrange their own training without having it too formal in a way.
Right.
Nice.
For you, you're a 4th degree black belt, right?
Yeah.
For you now, what's the most rewarding part of doing jiu-jitsu for you?
Rolling, because I've literally had injuries, and I rolled this morning and it was great. It's just nice to be, you get little injuries on, there's obviously, I don't know if it's partly my age and partly the length of time that I've been doing jiu-jitsu. So I don't know if someone started when they're 40, I don't know if they've got more kind of leeway with injuries that, or I don't know if it builds up over the years. So if you train for I don't know, if someone's trained for 40 years, they've got 40 years of jiu-jitsu based injuries, and then it gets worse. But I still enjoy rolling, So you forget sometimes if you've had a bit of time off with injury, and I still love teaching. I love helping other people, and that's obviously, even though it's my gym, it's still my hobby as well. But then when you get back to rolling, then you realise how much you actually, if you've had like a few months off rolling, then you come back again, you realise that's your passion and that's what you've got you into it, So
right. If you could go back and ask yourself, give yourself some advice throughout your jiu-jitsu career, white belt all the way through to when you got your black belt or even beyond, when would you go and what advice would you give yourself?
I suppose even when going through the grades, there's like no rush to go through the grades as well. That is, and I did anyway. But I think it is nice to compete. Kind of every belt, or at least compete. Once when you're going through. But specific advice for myself, I suppose it's to say maybe I'd have done a little bit more strength and conditioning. Maybe because when I went to Brazil, I was. Because I was there to do jiu-jitsu, I'd kind of focused just on jiu-jitsu. So I wasn't doing any strength and conditioning. I wasn't doing any... I'd do a little bit of extra training before competitions where, I'd be doing a little bit of strength and conditioning before competitions. I'll be doing sprints, stair sprints and other things. But because I didn't want to tire myself, I didn't want to go to the gym, and lift weights 5 days a week and then train jiu-jitsu less. So I'd spent probably too much time doing jiu-jitsu and not enough time, even if it's twice a week just doing strength and conditioning in Brazil. I think that might have helped my body a little bit more.
It's kind of like an injury prevention and
Yeah. To be fair, I was doing physiotherapy there. If I got injured, I'd see a proper physio in Brazil. So I was doing physiotherapy for any injuries I had there. But I probably should have, even if it was just 2 days a week, just had 2 sessions less of jiu-jitsu and spent 2 days, doing some kind of functional training for like strength and conditioning, I think.
Yeah, I get asked a lot, from our students, what can I do to make myself better at jiu-jitsu outside of the academy? And my answer personally is, well, nothing. You need to roll to become better at jiu-jitsu. You need to come to class. But I think it is important, as you say, if you want to be in jiu-jitsu for a long time, you've got to work on your mobility. You've got to recover well. You've got to lift and be strong, because that's just going to keep you going for longer, right? Because every injury you have is 3 months off the mat. Yeah. So you've got to kind of put the work in consistently to stay on the mat. Would you agree with that, Steve?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's just I understand why I was doing it, because I thought I'm in Brazil, and your main purpose of being there is to do jiu-jitsu, and obviously you can do strength and conditioning anywhere. So in my head, I was like, well, I'll. And at the end of the day, so there's world champions or ex-world champions who have just done jiu-jitsu and they get away with it, But I think that's probably more the exception. Whereas I think nowadays, most of the athletes are doing some form of strength and conditioning outside of their kind of jiu-jitsu training as well.
Yeah, I think Marcelo Garcia famously kind of said, if he had a choice between kind of working on it, so it'd be on the mat rolling, right?
Yeah. Which does make sense.
The game's changed too. I mean, look at the athletes now that are competing at the highest level. They're all in immaculate condition, and they're all extremely powerful and physical, and have to be if you want to compete.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Professor, go on, sorry.
Oh, sorry, but even if it's not even for the competition side of it, even it's just literally for longevity, to allow your body to, it's like you said, to stop yourself getting injured, so you're not having that time off because of injuries, which is taking you off the mat. And at the end of the day, you're losing mat time. So it's probably better to lose that mat time for a little bit every week and then try and stay injury-free.
For so many people coming up in jiu-jitsu, their goals are either like the next belt level or the black belt. But for you, having been a black belt for so long now, what kind of goals do you set yourself?
Obviously, I've got goals of like for my students to do well, as in not just competition-wise, but just to get people. It's nice when someone comes into the academy and you think there's no way they're going to carry on training. You shouldn't do it, but you just think they're probably not going to stay. And then when someone stays who's they're not the natural athlete, they might have never exercised before, they might be, a little bit older, and then they stick it and you see them getting better, then sometimes that's more rewarding than the kind of your gifted athlete who comes in and they're kind of expected to do well. Just seeing everyone else progress in the gym and they're getting better from themselves and they're getting their own levels better. I've not really got like, I'm kind of happy now. If I can be on the mats and I'm rolling, it doesn't even have to be intense rolling. I don't have to be rolling with like the best guys in the gym having competition rounds. I'm happy if I'm in them. If I can stay injury free and just and have some, roles where you're going 70-80% and I'm still training, then that's good for me now. I've not really got that. The goal of I want to compete and I want to, kind of blast the comp again. Yeah, that might change again if I'm, if I get like a good year or two in training and I've kept injury free, then obviously I might think, right, I'm going to go back and I'll do a competition again, but it's not my main goal at the moment. Yeah. But I always knew that when I was in Brazil, I kind of set myself a goal to compete a lot in Brazil because I knew it'd get harder when you come back and you've got a gym and you've got other things and other responsibilities. I knew it'd be harder. That's why I tried to get, to compete a lot then, just to kind of get it out of your system in a way.
For you and your students, do you think a lot about the kind of values that martial arts provides, or is it just kind of the training aspect that you enjoy?
It's both. In the gym, you constantly, obviously there's still, I'm there to teach people kind of martial arts and how to get better at jiu-jitsu and stuff. But obviously at the gym, it's hopefully, you know, like everyone at the gym, you know, they're all nice people who I get along with, and I hope that even if I hope kind of my personality kind of wears off on other people, where that kind of whole vibe and environment is making people better people as well. As in, I know it's a bit of a cliche, you know, saying, no, it's not just about jiu-jitsu, but I think that's just as a role model, because you're the one teaching and kind of passing on the techniques of jiu-jitsu. Some people still look up to you. And if you're kind of a nice, decent person who's happy to help other people out, then it does influence other people, whether not just the kids, but the adults as well. So if someone comes into the gym and they're being a dick, they should feel like, look, they're doing something wrong. And then that whole ethos of helping other people out and everything else, hopefully comes across and creates a better training environment for everyone that's more inclusive and, you know, and allows everyone to have that, you know, because everyone's got problems in the day-to-day life. And it's nice to come together in the jiu-jitsu world and, you know, and people can forget about the problems, not have problems on the mats, have a nice environment where, you know, obviously there's always some little bits of politics and things going on, but, you know, we're trying to stay out of that as much as possible and have that time. So people have got an environment where they can forget all the other problems. There's no issues with jiu-jitsu. They can come in, train, make friends, you know, and then leave hopefully feeling a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. And for you, having had so many, you know, great instructors, what is it for you that makes someone a good instructor or a great instructor?
I think over the years it's hard because lots of people have given, you know, I've trained with so many different people who've shown me, you know, so many great things. I think like sometimes some instructors are just good. They just connect with you better, you know. So their way of teaching might just connect with my way of learning, and then some people might show more concepts. So they instead of just techniques, they're showing something that goes across the whole board of jiu-jitsu, where, you know, you're not just learning one technique, you learn lots of other things. Some people, you might have a problem in a position and they just might have the perfect solution. Like, I mean, there's positions where there might be 10 things you can do, but only one of those 10 is going to work for me. And then one person might give me that 1 out of 10 that works for me, and I think they're the best instructor. But it's only because that's what, you know, I might lack flexibility, so I can't do, you know, 4 of the solutions to the problem, whereas someone might have a solution that just fits my body type, and, you know. So I think a lot of it depends on kind of that connection between student and instructor as well.
Amazing. Well, I'm kind of going to wrap this up, but with like this last question, if that's okay, Professor.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, what we usually ask people is if we've had a great time talking to you, and if you could point us towards someone in the jiu-jitsu community worldwide, they could be well known or not known at all, really, just as long as they've got an interesting story to share. Who would you kind of point us towards?
Oh, as in for someone else on your podcast?
Yeah, to reach out to.
I don't know. There's lots of. I'm trying to think. Like in Brazil, I have housemates in Brazil who are living with me there, and they're black belts now. So a few of those live in Texas. So it depends what you. Obviously, there's loads of people in the UK as well who train. So there's literally hundreds of people. But of my housemates in Brazil who live in who are from America, there was a guy called Brandon Mullins who used to live in my house in Brazil, a guy called Wesley Gann, a guy called Travis Tuck. They're all living in Texas at the moment, as far as I know.
Is that Brandon Mullins under Draclini or Brandon Mullins?
Yeah.
With the mullet, yeah?
Yeah. So
sweet. Yeah, it'd be awesome, yeah.
So yeah, he lived in the house with us for maybe 6 months, which was great, because then we'd literally just teach each other every day. So every day we'd have we'd train in the house in Brazil and just kind of, and we'd both be drilling, but we'd both have different things to show each other. So so it kind of worked out. So obviously there's so many people I've met over the years.
For sure.
They're 3 of my housemates who over the years have lived with, who are all black belts now. So I'm sure they'll have some good stories from Brazil, and kind of, you know, stories from, they're all like earlier black belts as well. So they've all got the black belts of between probably 2005 4 and 5 in 2007. So they should have some good stories.
Amazing. Well, thanks so much for doing this, Professor. I hope to meet you in person at some point.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks,
yeah. Cheers. Thanks a lot for having us.
Best, buddy.
See you
Bye,
soon.
mate.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.